Hello, everybody. Welcome to Hit Play. I'm Isaac Jimenez. Over there is James Harding. James, how you doing, man?
Dun 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 dun.
Tim, cue up the theme music. I'm assuming you're doing good then. If you're starting to do some chants.
Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm good. How are you?
Good, man. Good. I'm doing good, man. Can't complain.
Nice.
This heat starting to kill me, but it's good. Other than that, it's been good. This week is another exciting week. Not that every week isn't an exciting week, but this one is super exciting because we get to talk about a movie that is, I'll just say it right now, is the top 10 movie in my opinion. I know we like to say that 20 movies are in our top 10, but I think this movie is very much in my top 10.
Nice.
30th anniversary.
Yes.
I'm not going to say what it is because we have some other stuff to get to.
Okay.
But that's for later. So first, right off the bat, box office. We talked about Fast 9 and we were semi-analyzing forecasting what we thought the box office would do. I think I said we were going to make, I don't know. Do you remember what I said about Fast 9? How much I thought it was going to make for opening weekend?
I think you had said maybe 8 million.
What? No way. I did not say 8 million.
That's just the number that popped
Is
into
that what
my
I
head.
said? Maybe 80.
Okay, 80.
I think I said around probably 80.
80. Okay.
But Fast 9 took home its opening weekend, the weekend of June 25th through 27th. $70 million at the box office. Does that surprise you? Is that a little higher than you thought? A little less than you thought?
Well, it doesn't surprise me because we anticipated it to do much better than everything else.
Yeah.
So no, that doesn't surprise me at all. I think though, I'm so used to seeing pre-pandemic movies in the 100 millions that 80 million, 70 million, it is disappointing to see. But I think it's asking too much to expect numbers to immediately
and just
go back.
For a frame, and just for a reference, A Quiet Place Part 2 came in second with a $6 million weekend.
Okay, but that also wasn't the opening weekend for it.
No. I know that. I'm not trying to say that was bad of Quiet Place. It's just I'm kind of putting into perspective how much more money that Fast 9 made versus A Quiet Place Part 2.
True.
Kind of that wide disparity. So yeah, I guess.
Well, here's the wide.
I don't know. Did you?
I'll tell you this.
Oh, go ahead.
On its opening weekend, Quiet Place made 47 million. So there's even a bigger disparity between both opening weekends there.
Mm-hmm.
Which.
Yeah, Quiet Place has only made up to 136 million. So
I mean, independent horror.
A little more than.
Just a little under half. But it's like apples and oranges. You're comparing an independent horror film to the 9th movie in a franchise.
Yeah. No. I'm not trying to say nothing about that. I'm just,
Yeah.
It's good to kind of put a
perspective.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if you live by a movie theater or whatever, but Friday night and Saturday night, the theaters were packed by my house. I don't know if that was the case for you.
Really?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
First time I ever saw a parking lot full. It was kind of cool. It was like, oh, okay, we're starting to come back to nature is healing.
Yeah. I don't know about that one, but shout out to Delta variant. Yeah, that's gonna put a bit of a stopper. Do you think that is gonna be I'm not asking you to predict how Delta variant is gonna affect America, but do you think it's gonna put a stopper on movie theaters a second time?
No. I think so many people
That's
are
kind of
done
what I think too.
I think so many people are done with the pandemic and staying inside that it's just kind of like.
Even if there is
well, and the thing is too is we're 40% vaccinated, and the vaccine is 92% effective against the new variant or whatever, like 90% effective. So
Moderna is.
Yeah.
One of the vaccines is.
So it's not. we're not in the same place we were a year ago as far as
True.
the new variant
True.
coming out. It's not that I would
And-
don't think it. I don't think we're gonna go back into like a 6-month lockdown like we did last time.
At the very least, if you are vaccinated and you
Yeah.
get COVID, your symptoms will not be as severe.
Yeah.
You'll still be able to spread it to people who aren't vaccinated, and that won't be good. But nonetheless,
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I
get
think
vaccinated
COVID is.
people.
I think this is just gonna be a thing we have to kind of learn to live with.
Like the seasonal flu.
Yeah, I think it's just, and I'm not even trying to make a political statement. I mean, or anything like that. It's just a fact. I think it's just we're just gonna have to learn to live.
Yeah.
It's like every other virus that comes into it. I mean, we still have the damn bubonic plague around. It kills one person every year, so it's just something we kind of have to.
What can you do?
We'll get over it eventually. But no, I don't
But
think
get vaccinated.
I don't think the vaccine. I mean, not the vaccine. I don't think the virus will
Delta.
affect movie theaters in
Theaters.
any degree.
Yeah. That's kind of what I'm predicting. I think
No.
it would have to get really bad in
Yeah.
order to affect.
Yeah. Now, will streaming services affect the box office? That's still yet to be seen. We will see about that.
Do you know if Fast 9 was released on any streaming service?
It was not. Remember, it was
Already?
not. So I think
It was not.
they're waiting. I think what I read was a month until they go to video on demand. So like Amazon, whatever, wherever you buy
Makes sense.
videos on. But I think for now you kind of have to watch Fast 9 in the movie theaters. So, yeah.
Sorry to all of you Fast and Furious, all of you unvaccinated Fast and Furious fans.
You're gonna have to either risk your lives or not watch it and risk spoilers. So, in other news, two trailers, dropped that I wanna. I don't know if you saw
Touch
them.
on. What are they?
So the first one, the new Halloween. Did you happen to see that trailer?
Another Halloween? Another
Yup.
Halloween? Not The Purge.
Yep. No, I don't want to talk about the Purge. Yeah, new Halloween movie coming out. It's a direct sequel to the one that came out in 2018, I believe, 2019.
Oh,
which
with
that one was
Jamie Lee
a-
Curtis.
Yeah, that one was a reboot of the original Halloween. Yeah, 2018 was the reboot.
That's
It looks crazy. It looks more violent and it looks more like an action movie. I'm not spoiling anything, so I'm just gonna freely talk about it. But Jamie Lee Curtis
It's just the
basically,
trailer.
yeah, rounds up the entire town and is like, we have to kill Michael Myers. She's walking around with the shotgun. So
I'll say this: the best thing they ever could have done with the with the Halloween franchise was bring back Jamie Lee Curtis.
oh yeah, she's so good in the 2008 version. She's so good in it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's her role, man. That's like her role.
It started her whole career. Yeah. So
Oh man.
I actually really liked the 20. I don't know if you saw the 2018 version, but I actually really liked it.
So when does it come out though?
This Halloween.
Oh, they're already advertising it, and it comes out on Halloween.
Yeah, I think it comes out or October 15th. Excuse me. So 2 weeks before Halloween.
Oh, okay, interesting.
So, yep.
All right, what's
And-
your second trailer?
Second trailer, Many Saints of Newark, the Sopranos prequel movie that is coming out, I believe also in October.
You and The Sopranos.
Hey man, I
Okay.
haven't talked about the Sopranos
Is
as
it
much as you
direct-
talk about Terrence Malick.
Is it directed by David Chase?
No, it's directed by Alan Taylor, who was a writer on The Sopranos. So there's
Okay, that's not bad.
yeah.
That's not bad.
David Chase did write it though.
If it was okay, that's good. That's good. I approve of that.
So the only reason I have
Let
hope
me ask
for
you
it
this.
is because it's
Okay.
Alan Taylor directed and it's through David Chase written. Watching the
That's it.
trailer though, I am slightly disappointed.
Visually, it looks very different from the show.
Yes.
It looks impossibly different from the show.
Yes. Which I actually kind of appreciate that because it's trying to set apart it's trying to be its own thing. We saw this most recently with the Breaking Bad El Camino, where Breaking Bad is visually so much different than El Camino.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of following in that same vein. But I don't know. From the trailer, I'm disappointed. I don't know why they decided to cut it up like it's some mid 2000s mediocre gangster movie and not the prequel of one of the greatest TV shows of all time. I don't know. I feel like we could have done something more. Not a single curse word, not people getting beat up. It's just shots of guns and money and Italian mobsters just talking to each other. Hey, watch your cousin. He's a crazy fellow. I don't know. I feel like we could have done so much better on the trailer.
Yeah, this kind of looks like generic indie action movie. I don't know, man. As somebody who hasn't seen the show but knows about the show and knows of it, I can tell you that this doesn't look like Sopranos.
No.
And that's enough for me to not really care for it. Which, who knows? Who knows? It might come down to the story,
Yeah.
Is the story going to feel like Sopranos?
Mm-hmm.
Especially if it's a prequel, too, Do you feel like The Sopranos... Here's a segue into our topic for today. Did you feel like the Sopranos needed a prequel?
No, I don't. Because everything that needed to be said about Tony was said about Tony.
What's said about him?
Yeah, and then there's even flashback sequences in the show to show his character back in the day. So it's kind of, I don't know, it feels kind of cheap that we're getting a trailer, a movie. But I also said the same thing about El Camino with Better Call Saul. Not El Camino, Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. Like, do we need a Better Call Saul series? And
spin-off, yeah.
It's arguably the same level of Breaking Bad, or not, if not better. So,
yeah.
I'm gonna hold out on forming an opinion. I'm gonna keep an open mind when I go to watch this. But
okay,
I was not very impressed with the first impressions.
Here's your actual segue. Do you think The Sopranos needs a sequel?
Bum bum bum.
Dun 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 dun.
No, but you know what didn't need a sequel and got one anyways? And it ended up being one of the greatest movies of all time? Terminator 2. 30 years old. Happy birthday to Terminator 2.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday to Terminator 2.
Let's start at the beginning though. Terminator.
Well, I want to start here. I'm going to start here.
You want to start there?
Hold on.
Okay.
I just have a question for you.
Okay, what's your question?
Is Terminator 2 the greatest sci-fi movie of all time?
No, obviously not. No.
Whoa. Oh man, this is where we're gonna disagree.
Is it your greatest sci-fi movie of all time?
It's definitely top 3, and it's not 2 or 3.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding. In all honesty, it's in my top 3.
Okay, not bad. Let me ask you this then. Is it the greatest sequel of all time?
No. I can say that straight up, no.
Okay. Oh yeah, I forget. The Dark Knight.
Yeah, it can't be when The Dark Knight and Godfather Part 2 exist.
Let's start with the first Terminator though. Because I want to ask you this.
Okay.
When you see the first one or you think about the first movie, It doesn't, because the first movie doesn't end with a setup to a sequel. It
You don't think it
ends with
does?
the Terminator. I don't think it doesn't at all. No, I think it ends with the Terminator dying, and you're like, there you go, that's the end.
I don't know,
I
cause
don't think it ends with the,
she drives off into the Mexican. I don't want to say wilderness, but she just drives off, and it feels like they were setting something up.
I didn't see it that way, man. I feel like that was supposed to be the ending.
Interesting. Okay.
That's
Well,
how I see it.
continue your thought. I'm sorry.
If you think about how the first movie ends, though, does Terminator 2 seem like the logical progression? Because I think a lot of people forget that those two movies are vastly different from each other.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, yes, I think so. And I think I actually watched this in preparation for this episode. Um, it feels right, especially because there's such a big time jump in not only the
Yes.
narrative but also the production of the movies. So Terminator 1 came out
Oh
in
yeah.
84, Terminator 2 came out in 91. So that's a good 7, what is that? 7 years? Um which is kind of weird because every
Yes.
time anytime we get a sequel 7 years later nowadays we're kind of like why?
It's gonna be a reboot. Yeah.
Yeah, we wonder why are we like why did this need to exist, right? And
Yeah.
I'm sure people were thinking that during back then during Terminator 2 days, but I don't know, it ended up being the same level, if not better than Terminator 1. Um,
Oh, you think it's the same level as Terminator 1. So you also put Terminator 1 in high regard as well?
I mean, there's such different movies though. Terminator 1 isn't
They
even really it is a sci-fi movie, but it's not as sci-fi as Terminator 2. It's more of
no.
a horror movie.
It's like a horror action movie, yeah.
Yeah, and Terminator 2 is just straight blockbuster sci-fi shoot
Action,
'em up
yeah.
action packed adventure movie. And it's kind
Yeah.
of cool to see how they're so different. And yet, yeah, like I think they do. I think Terminator 2 is a natural continuation. I mean, the events of Terminator 1 leave. I mean, you can understand why Sarah Connor is all messed up from the events of Terminator, the first Terminator. She fell in love with this
Yeah.
dude from the future and she has
Yeah.
his baby. And some guy came out of the future out of nowhere to kill her. And then, he can kind of come whenever. And it's that sense of impending doom that kind of is the theme of this whole franchise, but really these two movies.
Mm.
And I think Terminator 2 is a good continuation. I feel like you disagree with me though.
I don't think it's a not, oh yeah, okay. So what I disagree with is it being the logical progression. And that's what I love about it. I think Terminator 2 is superior to the first one in almost every way. And I think it's because it almost went in such a completely different direction. Like
Yeah.
you said, it's almost a different genre.
Mhm.
And that's why I don't think it really makes sense as a sequel, but that's also why it works. Because when we were talking about The Dark Knight, we were talking about how it gives you what you expected out of Batman, but it doesn't tell the same Batman story. It's almost a different genre. And I think Terminator 2 is similar. It gives you what you want out of Terminator, which is Arnold shooting people and saying iconic lines. But it's just a totally different film. It goes in such a vastly different direction from the first. And it builds and expands upon, like, there was no mythology in the first Terminator movie, and then the second one gives you like
The whole
Arnold says
world.
more than one line. Yeah.
Yeah.
Something like that. And that's why I just think it works so much better. Yeah. So that's what I disagree with. I think it's better than the first. I agree with that. But I disagree with that it makes sense as a sequel.
Interesting.
But that's why it works. I think that's why it works so much better, for sure. And we have to say too, we should mention this. This is not the first time James Cameron has done this.
No,
Because
no,
he did Aliens.
yeah, he most famously, I think, even more so, was Aliens, which is also kind of the similar vein. The first movie was a survival horror thriller, and the second one is action packed. And
Hmm.
uh, yeah, so he's kind of like the king of sequels in that matter, at least for the 80s.
Yeah.
Well, there's yet to be seen if he comes out with ever comes out with Avatar 2.
If he
But
ever comes out with Avatar 2. Yeah, seriously.
um
God.
but yeah, man, this movie is amazing.
Let me ask you some specifics then to get your thoughts on the movie.
Okay.
How did you feel about, between Terminator 1 and Terminator 2, how do you feel about Sarah Connor? Because in the first movie, she's just a normal girl who is thrown in an intense situation and she just tries to cope with it as best she can, but she doesn't really participate. But in the second movie, she's totally like flipped the script on herself to the point where she's now willing to go out of her way to assassinate people just because she's like a warlord, you know?
Yeah.
How do you feel about that character arc?
I mean, Sarah Connor is one of the, if not the most iconic female character of all time, regardless of genre.
Outside of Ripley from Alien and Aliens.
Which is kind of cool because they're both so similar in their character arcs, where in the beginning they're very timid and almost scared. And in their second movies, they're very more, I don't want to say macho, but more like
they're badass.
Gruff. Yeah, they're badass. Yeah, they're badass women. I like this. I like the character of Sarah Connor because I think this could be anybody after, seeing what she saw and
Men from the future kill you. Yeah.
Yeah, and just kind of so the way I see it is you can either, if something like that happens, you can hide from it or you can just embrace it and go with it, because I think the whole theme of these movies is the future has to happen no matter what, right? So and I think Sarah Connor realizes that, and so instead of being a timid, scared person that she is in the first film, she's just like, you know what? I'm gonna get buff. I'm gonna buy a bunch of weapons and stash them in the desert, and when they come back from me and my son, I'll be ready for them this time. I don't need help from anybody. And she actually rejects help multiple times in this movie, which was kind of cool, because usually female characters in action movies, typically they need a male. Who are getting help. Yeah, they need a male.
Yeah,
and she's actually on the level of Arnold in this movie in some scenes.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool. I enjoy her character. I think she's definitely should be a more celebrated female hero, in my opinion.
What I personally also love about the character is how weirdly she kind of is crazy and she's oddly neglectful of her kid.
Yeah.
Like, I just love that they didn't go all the way into being like, she's unnecessarily badass and strong. It's like, well, she's also kind of, obsessed with the future and obsessed with protecting her kid. And she did, like, I remember there was a scene the first time they go to the desert, and the kid is like, John says, I didn't know that people had normal childhoods. I thought this was just what everyone did. And I'm like, I'm so glad that they left that part in, because it's like, if you knew that people were going to come and kill you from the future and you had to protect your son, you wouldn't give them a normal childhood.
No, yeah.
But how would that affect you as a parent? I'm so glad they left that in. And it's one of the reasons why I like the Sarah Connor character. Because in a weird way, she's still kind of like a bad person.
Yeah.
She's a terrible parent.
I think she doesn't even say hi to her kid till like 2/3 of the way through the movie, I think. There's
something like that.
There's the scene. My favorite scene is when they're in the car and she tries to. It looks like she's going in for a hug, but she's just checking for bullet holes, and then she just yells at him. Is like, "Why are you coming after me? Don't like save yourself." It's like, dude, this
Yeah.
kid just he wanted to come save you. Like that's what a son is supposed to do for his mother, and you're just kind of neglecting that fact. It shows that she's a bad parent, but at the same time, she's
Yeah.
not because she has to protect him and save him to become the leader of the future resistance, which is a, a bizarre concept to think about. Let me ask you this: how did you feel about him so knowingly the main
John
character,
Connor.
John Connor? Excuse me, I don't know why I was thinking of James Connor. Maybe because I'm talking to you, James.
Yeah, probably.
But John Connor knowing that he was gonna be the leader of the resistance in the future, because I think in most movies, if somebody knows a secret and it can kind of go bad, it can go bad, but I think in this movie it's played very well. How did you feel about
Well,
that character choice?
I think the reason why it works in this movie is because they basically, and this is where I think James Cameron does a really good job in this movie, is like he doesn't tell you this, but he shows you that John Connor is much more interested in just being a normal kid than he is being the leader of the future resistance.
Mm-hmm.
Because like John Connor knows, yeah, I'm gonna have to do this, and one day I'll have to do that. Maybe it's just kind of crazy. My mom's just crazy. Oh, it's real. Okay, well, I still just get to be a normal kid, right? And everyone's like, yeah, sure. He's like, okay, cool. I'll just help you out for now. I just thought that was so smart that they made it so obvious that he kind of isn't bothered by it. He just wants to be a kid. And they didn't have to tell you. There's no scene where he's like, the prophecy is real. He's
Yeah,
just kind of like, hey, Arnold, can I ride your motorcycle?
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah.
I appreciated that.
Did you enjoy the
appreciated
character of John Connor?
Oh, yeah. I thought it was, I mean, first off, the actor, for a kid actor, I thought he was okay.
Yeah.
There were a few moments where I could tell that maybe his lines were, dubbed over in ADR or something like that. But
so what I read was he went through puberty super duper quick through production.
Oh, really?
So a lot of
Wow.
the scenes that have ADR, it's because his voice was a lot squeakier or not squeakier, but softer back then.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
That's pretty funny.
Because I noticed that too this time around. I was like, he's saying something completely different than what his mouth is mouthing. It was,
Yeah.
but yeah. What can you do?
That makes sense. Yeah, true. I think he did an okay job. Kid actors are always hit or miss, and I thought he was kind of in the middle. I just think it's just a strong character. I think he's just such a strong, well-written character. Mainly because of his attitude towards everything. Like, some people might think it's boring if a character just kind of accepts everything that happens to him. But all the other characters, I think, kind of balance it out. People like Sarah, who will just reject everything that happens to him. Or Arnold, who will just kind of, do whatever anyone says to do. And I don't know. I thought he was just a good balance, a good mix of things.
Yeah.
Now let me ask you this. How did you feel about Arnold being the hero in this movie? And this was something you and I didn't know. We weren't born in the 80s.
Correct.
But my dad was. And when I told him about Terminator 2, he was like, it was mind-blowing to see Arnold go from the villain to the hero. Like, that was such a genius decision, and it totally made the movie. If he was the villain a second time, it would have been the same movie as the first, and it would have been unwatchable. But that he was the hero, that is where the magic of the movie is.
Yeah, and it kind of launched his whole career into the stratosphere even more. This is arguably his peak.
You know why?
Highest
It's
grossing movie of
because
all
he
time.
has speaking parts.
Yeah.
He has
I think
speaking parts in the second
I
film.
think this movie he has 700 lines of dialogue. So I think every word was like $75,000 or something like that was what I was looking at.
Wow,
Speaking
that's
on
crazy.
Schwarzenegger though. Yeah, it is cool because I think this is his most compassionate character up until that time, at least. I know he did
Mm,
Conan, um, which I don't think we can both say that's a super passionate
a
character.
compassionate character.
Yeah. Obviously he did
He did that.
turn the he did Terminator first, so
Yeah.
um but this was the first time we actually got to see a little bit of him just being more human, which was kind of interesting because he's playing a android. Um
Cyborg, get it right.
Cyborg, excuse me. I'm a cybernetic computer machine built by Cyberdyne. Um yeah, because I think also too is the way it's framed up until the mall scene, you don't know which one's the good guy and which one's the bad guy, right?
And that's also this is a bit of a tangent, but we might talk about this later. But one of the things with sequels, that is often a problem with bad sequels is they rely too much on your knowledge of the first movie.
Yeah.
And I think part of the reason why it was genius that he's the hero this time is because if you saw the first Terminator and then you watch Terminator 2 and you're like, oh my God, you know, he shows up and then it's the other guy shows up and you're like, okay, well, in the first movie, Arnold showed up first and he's the villain. In this one, he shows up first, he's the villain again. But then when it's flipped on you and he's the hero this time, first off, that twist works even if you haven't seen the first movie because
Mm-hmm.
you're just going to assume he's the hero. But if you did see the first movie, then it's an actual twist and you're like, oh my God. So it plays off your knowledge of the first one, but it works even without it. Um, what was your question?
Well, that was my question was it's framed to be you don't know which one is which because we think that Arnold is the bad guy and Robert Patrick is dressed up as a cop. So we're led to believe, oh, he's a
Yeah.
cop. He's supposed to be a good guy. And
That's how you can tell it's the 90s.
yeah. And it gets flipped on us. And then we're like, oh, the cop is the bad guy.
Yeah.
No political
And they
statements
hold
there.
that until the very last minute that they can possibly reveal it
Mm-hmm.
to. Because he's walking down the hallway and he flips the rose box and he pulls out the shotgun and you're like, man, I've been here before. And when he repeats those same lines where he says, get down, you're just like, wait a second. They hold off on that reveal until the last possible minute. I think
Yeah.
it's so smart.
And I think it was cool that
It's so smart.
they held that suspense and they put it into Sarah Connor because Sarah Connor wasn't at the mall. She was in a mental hospital. And so when she sees Arnold Schwarzenegger the first time, she's like, oh, like, what the hell is going on? And it's not till her kid,
Yeah.
till John is there, like, hey. He's actually pretty good. And then
Cool.
he gives the line,
Yeah.
he come with me if you want to live. Do you think, let me ask you this, do you think Kyle Reese told, or do you think the future John Connor told the old Terminator to do that?
To do that? That's an
to
interesting
say that
theory,
line?
and I would believe it. That's an interesting theory. I'd believe it. Yeah.
Because that
believe
is such a Kyle Reese line, right?
it. Yeah. Come with me if you want to live.
Because I think John Connor has no wherewithal to understand, like, hey, if I send this Terminator that looks exactly like the one that tried to kill my mom, I should probably send like a note or something, right?
Yeah. Something like that.
So he says the same line that
Yeah, that's
Kyle Reese
interesting.
does. Maybe it's a little bit of a coincidence. I don't know. I don't feel
Maybe
like
it's
it is.
just it's that, or it's just hey, he said it in the first movie.
Because
Let's have him say it in the
there's
second
yeah,
movie.
because there's so much depth. It leads me to believe that it wasn't a coincidence because there's so much depth in this movie that you would be surprised is in this movie for a science fiction 90s science fiction movie. Whether it's the impending doom that's come, the theme of impending doom, or even within the characters themselves, how nuanced they are and how much they feel like real people. Um,
Mm.
which is kind of surprised. Were you surprised at the amount of depth that there was in this movie for being a 90s science fiction action movie?
Yeah, and I think for me, a lot of that depth came from the Sarah Connor character
Mm-hmm.
because I remember the scene. She has the bad dream where she imagines the playground, and then there's the nuclear explosion in the background, and everyone just burns to a crisp.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, Jesus Christ, you didn't have to show us this much. Um, and how that immediately drives her to do the assassination, to try to put a stop to everything. That was for me where I found a lot of the depth in this movie, was in her character. And maybe that's because in the first movie, it's kind of bad, her character. Sarah Connor in the first movie she's not a bad character, but it's such a product of the era.
She's a cliche damsel in distress. Yeah.
Yeah. Dude, at the end of the first movie where she's talking on the tape recorder and she's like, I should tell you about your father. I only knew him for a few hours. And I'm like, hold up. Stop right there. You only knew this guy for a few hours?
Yeah.
And he's had your kid? That's a bit of men writing women right there. Which is why I like her in the second movie so much better. Because she actually has her own agency. That's just me personally. What can you do? Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. What do you think of the actual story for the second movie? Because the first film, for as much as I'll say I didn't like it, it was a totally fine action movie. It hit all the cliche beats that you knew an action movie from the 80s were going to have. But the second, Terminator 2, like, has a kind of a weird structure to it.
Yeah.
It has like a 4-act structure.
It breaks a lot of screenwriting rules, like screenwriting 101 tips.
Like, it's not that it's an unconventional story, but it just expands upon its own story. So many moments.
Yeah.
Like, there are so many moments where the characters will be like, we have to do this. And then they'll go there. And it's like, oh no, we have to do this over there. And they'll go there. And I'm like,
you know what it reminds me of?
Is there going to be a climax? What does it remind you of?
It reminds me of Batman Begins. The way it's structured. As far from a script, from a narrative. Where we have the intro.
Kind of like there's the 4 parts. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We have the intro, and then we have, 2 middle parts, and then we have the dramatic conclusion. It feels eerily similar to Batman Begins.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting because there's multiple objectives within this movie, which I didn't catch the first time when I was younger. I was like, oh, cool. A truck is crashing into the tunnel or whatever. I was like, dope. But, now studying movies for a career and somewhat quote unquote career. Yeah, it was kind of cool seeing like, okay, so the first objective is let's try and find John Connor. Okay, we found John Connor. Now let's go save Sarah Connor. Okay, we saved Sarah Connor. Okay, now we gotta, what are we doing? Now we're gonna escape to Mexico.
Get the Michael guy. Yeah.
Well, now we're in Mexico. Now let's go kill Cyberdyne. Let's go kill the guy. Now we almost killed the guy. It just takes you on this whole adventure that I don't think... Yeah. Well, I don't really even know any action movies that do that except for Batman Begins. Batman Begins is kind of similar to that. And I was kind of surprised by how much of a whirlwind, for lack of a better word, this narrative is.
The story is. Yeah.
But I think it kind of helps it because it gives it that sense of, like, this is a world. This just affects more than one person. Right? This affects a whole lot of things. This affects the whole world. And I think
more so than that, too. Oh, you go first. You finish.
Well, I was gonna say just allowing the narrative to grow in different locations and different characters and touching different people. It shows that.
Mhm.
What were you gonna say?
And I think it also shows you, like, it's a good example of the story being driven by decisions. Because the problem
Hmm.
with a lot of story structures is if you know the structure, like everyone knows, exposition, rising action, climax, falling action,
Yeah.
resolution. You've seen that so many times and you've ingested it so many times that it's like oftentimes when a character's decision leads to a cliched story beat that you've seen a million times, it doesn't feel like a real decision. And so part of the reason why Terminator 2 might feel like a whirlwind is because they did a really good job of the structure matches the character's decision makings, which is why it feels unconventional and feels a lot more like almost like there is no structure to it. Because it's like, you saved me, cool, but now I want to go save my mom. And it's like
Yeah.
in conventional storytelling wisdom would tell you, well, there's more to this. There's a whole other kind of plot you have to go on. But no, this character wants to do this. We're going to follow that. Like you're seeing character decision
Hmm.
making impact the storytelling, which in action movies never happens. Because everything is so much on the, like, you're going to have your first, your what's it called, like the first incident, and then you're going to have your rising action, and then your second incident, and then so on and so forth. um like the first Terminator movie is a classic example of that too, where it's like you just know the second that the car pulls off to the side of the road, you're like, okay, we're going to have a sex scene in at least 5 minutes from now. And then you get your flashback, and then you get your sex scene, and then blah blah blah, you move on. And it's like these don't feel like real decisions. It just feels like you're doing a story structure.
Yeah.
Whereas Terminator 2, I think, I feel like I'm talking about it like it's the greatest movie of all time, but it's not. But it doesn't do that. It's just characters making these decisions, and the
Hmm.
story just follows it. Because, and it's really good of you to bring up Batman Begins, because it's similar in how it also treats the villain, the T-1000. Kind of like how Ra's al Ghul shows up at the beginning, and then 2 hours later he shows up at the end.
Yeah.
That's the T-1000. He shows
Hmm.
up at the beginning, and then 2 hours pass without him, and then he shows up again at the end.
Yeah.
It's like the exact same structure, yeah. So very perceptive of you.
Hey man, it's what I do. When you watch the Dark Knight
That's what your
trilogy,
education is for.
when you watch the Dark Knight trilogy as much as I have, you pick up on things. um.
LMAO.
All right, let's
I will
talk
say
about
this
this.
though.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Let's talk about criticisms though.
Well, okay.
The ending to Terminator 2 went on for too long.
You think?
I think so.
What when you say ending, what do you mean? Do you mean the from what point to
He
what
says
point?
hasta la vista when he says hasta la vista baby, and he shoots the guy and he blows up cuz he's frozen solid and he blows up. That should have been the ending of his death. From there on you can do the, lower me into the lava.
Yeah.
But the T-1000 should have died when he got frozen solid.
Yeah, I always wonder why they did that. Was it, I feel like it was supposed to be some sort of twist, like, oh, this thing cannot die, but it's.
Because it's mimicking the first movie. The first movie, Terminator blows up, and then he's the robot skeleton, and he's still alive, and he comes after them. That's what
right.
they're doing.
Okay, that makes sense.
They're recreating the
And
first
then they
movie.
chase him. Yeah, yeah, that's the part
Yeah.
where I was like, did we really need to recycle this scene? Because we had such a dope scene, the scene before with when they were doing the shootout at Cyberdyne. That I was
Yeah.
like, man,
Yeah.
it kind of feels. I don't know if you felt it, but it felt a little anticlimactic at the end too.
Yeah. And I think that comes down to the story structure, because like we're saying, it's almost like four different mini stories, and each of them has their own beginning, middle, and end. And so it's like you'll get the Finding John Connor, and that has its own climax in it. Sorry, I had the cough. It's like it's hard because each one has to be bigger than the one before it. It's just that the last one isn't as big as the Cyberdyne. Because in Cyberdyne, they're like blowing up an entire building. And then in the very end of the film, he just kind of shoots the guy. And he dies.
Yeah.
And that's it. And you're just kind of like, Like, the expectation is that there will be more spectacle, more explosions.
Yeah. Because
he's not going to get frozen solid. He's going to blow up the entire building or something like that, you know?
we were. I don't know. To me, it was like, okay, we kept doing these action sequences that escalated further and further, and just to end with throwing him in a lava pit, like the first movie. Well, I guess the first movie was the hydraulic press, but you know what I mean. It just felt a little cheap to me.
No, I get what you're saying. Though.
Did you feel like at any point it was a little too long, especially in the middle?
No.
Okay.
No. Did you?
No, not really. This is one of the movies where it's rare that you would say keep that in every movie or keep every scene in the movie.
Yeah.
Because usually in a lot of science adventure, action, sci-fi movies, the middle part is always the most boring part.
The slow part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it didn't really feel that way with this one. So
I think it's curious. Because we see because the more or less the middle part of the movie is when they're in Mexico.
Yeah.
And the reason why I don't think it feels slow is because you're getting introduced to new characters, and you're getting not a flashback, but a vision of the future. Typically, conventional storytelling wisdom tells you the middle part of your action movie, you're going to slow it down. You know, you're going to get a flashback into, you know, someone's going to tell their story about how they know information or whatnot. Two characters are probably going to fall in love or something like that. But in this movie, in Terminator 2, the slow part is you're still meeting new characters. You meet the guys with the guns. And then Sarah Connor has the vision of the future with the nuclear bomb. And so you're still learning new information. And that's usually why the slow parts feel slow, is because you're not learning anything new.
Yeah.
Like, did you ever think about how like a character knows a piece of information and then they tell you a flashback about how they learned it? You're still technically not learning anything new because you know, as an audience member, they already know this.
Yeah.
Kyle Reese already knows Sarah Connor is the mother to John Connor. And the audience already knows that. So when he tells his flashback, you're like, yeah, we already know this. We're just seeing it in a different time period. That's why it feels slow and boring, because it's literally nothing that you don't already know.
Yeah, for as much world building as this movie does, and it does a lot more than the first, it doesn't ever bog down too much.
Yeah. And we don't even really see the past much.
No, I think we only see it in the beginning, right?
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool. I actually really like that.
Yeah, it's an interesting decision. Yeah, I would like it too. What did you think of... This is going to be a weird question because it's about the first movie. But what did you think comparatively about the visual effects in the first movie compared to the second movie?
Well, they're much muted and they're more practical. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Do you know if in the first movie, if it was stop motion or if it was animatronic?
It was stop motion.
Okay. That's what it looked like.
Yeah. Yeah, you can definitely tell that movie's effects haven't aged as well as this movie's.
Terminator 2.
Which
No.
we should talk about because this is
Oh yeah.
a 30-year-old movie, and yet if you told me, hey, this movie came out 5 years ago, I think a lot of people would believe you. If if everything else was dated correctly, like the wardrobes and the
Yeah.
other technology. But in terms of filmmaking, the cinematography, and especially the special effects, it doesn't feel 30 years old, which is kind of surprising. Because we watch movies that were, even the damn Avengers, some of the movies look pretty bad nowadays.
Yeah, seriously. I think that the effects in this movie are used very intelligently.
Yes.
And now, how much of that is because they couldn't do much of them because it was literally new technology?
Yeah.
That might play a part in it. But you know what? When you're watching those opening credits and it says, visual effects by Industrial Lights and Magic, you know you're going to get something wild. Because those guys,
they know what they're doing.
They will invent new things all the time. They're kind of like in the Pixar brain where it's like, we want to do this, but we don't know how. Well, we'll just find a way how to do it. That's kind of like, that's what they are. That's definitely what Industrial Lights and Magic is like. Because they did all the Star Wars movies,
Yep,
which was also all new technology.
Shout out to our boy Lucas for founding ILM.
Yeah, seriously.
But speaking on ILM, or go ahead. Sorry.
Oh yeah, no, I was just finishing off with a thought terminating cliche. You go.
Well, I was gonna say, you were talking about how ILM was such a big impact on this movie. They actually had to hire more people just to animate the T-1000. So they had, prior to Terminator 2, they had 6 artists working for them. And they hired 30 more. Cost, just to show you the price of graphics nowadays, or CGI, it cost $5.5 million at the time. So that's probably, I don't even know, like 9 million now. Took 8 months to produce and was only 3.5 minutes of screen time.
That's insane.
So that's what,
and you know what too, but that's why I think it's so intelligently done, because even though it's only 3 minutes of screen time, every single thing that they do in those 3 minutes is something new.
Mm-hmm.
There's, first off, just the general look of him and the actual shape shifting. And then there's the scene where he phases through the bars of the jail. And then there's the scene where the final fight scene with him and Arnold. And in those 3 moments, that's like all his screen time. But each time they're doing something different with his body and with the effects. Mm-hmm. And that's why I think it's so intelligent, is because it's not like they took one scene where they said, we're going to blow all our budget on this one scene and do all the crazy stuff here. They spread it out throughout the movie. And that's what I think makes it so much more interesting to watch.
And they always do it for a jaw-dropping moment, too. Like that bar scene when he phases through the bars in the mental hospital. Nowadays, we're like, oh, yeah, I could pull up, After Effects.
I could do that in Blender,
I could pull up After Effects and do that now. But back then in the 80s, or the 90s, excuse me, that was like, oh my, what the, as an audience, people were probably like, oh, cool, we're good, we're saved, there's bars there, the key's broken, we're good. And then he just goes through it and we're like, what the hell?
Yeah.
It's just a mind-shattering moment for the audience.
Yeah. There's that, and then in the final fight scene, here's the scene that always blew my mind, even to this day. In the final fight scene with Arnold, the T-1000 gets thrown against the wall, and then his whole body phases through itself, and he reverses himself. It happens. Yeah. That's one of those moments where James Cameron is like, okay, this one shot is going to take millions of dollars, and it's only going to be on screen for like
2
a
seconds.
second.
Yeah.
2 seconds. But we have to do it because it's going to just blow everyone's minds. And I'm like...
It did.
It's one of those things that's so fast that it's almost like, okay, I can only imagine if you're in the theater and you see that, you're like, I can't rewind. I have to buy another ticket to see this again.
We're buying the 12:30 showing, honey. I had to see that again.
Yeah. Seriously. That's seriously how I would have felt. Because that's still how I felt. It's like, even to this day, when I was rewatching it and I was like, hold on, I gotta pause, go back, watch that again. Okay, now I can go. Now I can watch again. And keep going. Yeah, man, that's one of those moments where I'm just like, I don't know. It's hard to, it's insane. I don't know how you feel. It's insane to watch stuff like Terminator 2 where you know it's the first time something like that's ever been done. That these are literally new effects. Because it's like kind of like watching the first Star Wars movie, you know, where you're just like, I can't imagine watching this back when it first came out. The fact that nobody had ever seen anything like that before, it's crazy, man. We're so used to it. Where's all our new effects? How come our generation doesn't have any new special effects?
Seriously, right? Like, wait, I don't know. When's the last time your jaw dropped from special effects in a movie?
From special effects,
It's been a while.
I can't. Yeah, I mean, I can say that there are moments where I'm like, that looks very good CGI.
Yeah.
But I can't name a moment where I saw something and I was like, that's insane CGI. But what can you do? Maybe we're asking too much.
I think we're asking a little too much out of Hollywood. But the thing that's also cool about this film and that allowed it to age so well is, like you said, the then it doesn't rely too much on special effects, but it also relies heavily on practical effects. I mean, whether it's Arnold actually on a bicycle when they're actually dropping the truck off of the freeway.
Oh yeah.
Or, you know, actually pushing a helicopter pilot out of a helicopter.
Yeah. Some of that stuff.
Or even the nuclear dream. That's all practical.
Yeah.
I think it's allowed it to have such a blissful aging process throughout these years because.
Yeah. Back in the day when special effects were reserved for special effects.
Yeah, yeah. And now it feels like special effects are kind of practical effects.
Everything. Yeah.
Just because it feels like most filmmakers are super lazy.
Well, lazy, but we also have to understand that this movie, for the time, was ridiculously expensive. And a lot of movies nowadays use special effects. Like, here's just to show you the evolution. Back then, the reason why this movie was so expensive was because of all the special effects. Nowadays, movies use special effects because they're cheaper.
And because it's easier.
So, and it's easier, yeah. It's cheaper and easier nowadays, and that's just how far it's come.
Nah, I still think it's lazy.
I
still think it's lazy filmmaking.
You still think it's lazy? LMAO. I don't think so.
Just do it for real. Just do it for real. Why can't we throw people off of helicopters or shoot miniguns?
Hey, if you want to see Tom Cruise in every movie, then by all means, we'll throw people out of helicopters. It just has to be Tom Cruise. He's the only one willing to do it. Him or Jackie Chan.
True. Fair. Your favorite scene of this movie?
Favorite scene in this movie?
Mm-hmm.
It would have to be the escape from the mental hospital. That whole sequence.
Mm-hmm.
Either that or the truck chase in the flood drain.
Yeah, that hospital scene is so surreally shot. I don't know if you noticed that on your rewatch, But the slow motion, the
Mm.
moonlit, excuse me, hallway, the all white interior. I don't know. It felt kind of
I can
interesting to
see what
see
I.
in a science fiction movie to be so almost art housey.
I think the closest this movie gets to our house is going to be the nuclear explosion.
That too, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Which, speaking on the nuclear explosion, did you know that the U.S. federal nuclear testing labs declared it the most accurate depiction of a nuclear blast ever created for a fictional motion picture?
Dude, that's just it, James Cameron. Freaking in Titanic, Neil deGrasse Tyson said that, oh, the stars in the sky actually aren't accurate to what the stars would have looked like at that time of year.
Mm-hmm.
James Cameron re edited the movie so the stars were accurate.
That sounds like a James Cameron thing. So thorough and yeah,
Yeah, so that's the director you're working with right there.
it's pretty cool though. I thought that
Seriously,
was cool.
God.
Um, my favorite scene is probably either the mental hospital scene or the shootout at Cyberdyne.
Mm, yeah, that's an interesting.
That's a good
That's an
scene.
interesting pick.
My favorite shot in this whole movie though, single shot, is when the scientist character, his name is escaping me right now.
Michael, I think.
Miles.
Miles.
Yeah,
Okay.
when he's sitting there with the detonator and he's doing the heavy breathing, and then it just drops
He's
and
like,
it
I
just
can't hold
blows
this.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's still my favorite shot in the whole movie. Just
That's your favorite
just
shot in the whole movie.
stops breathing and just drops it on the thing, on the detonator.
I think my favorite single shot is when the semi truck drops into
Drops.
the flood drainage pipe. And it's like, because it's just in that one shot where you have John Connor in the foreground, then you have the truck dropping in the background, and you're just like, get the kid out of the way. Don't put him.
Yeah, right.
Because actors have been like, working with James Cameron, he wants you to risk your limbs for shots. And I'm like, get the kid out of the way of the truck, my guy. What are you doing?
I think
Yeah.
they actually almost crashed the truck end over end when it went off the bridge.
That's
If I'm not
crazy.
mistaken. You can
I
see it in
believe
the
it, dude.
you can see it in one of the shots that they did where it kind of like it looks like it's about to go end over end and you're like, "Oh shit."
That's just crazy.
Pretty
Freaking James Cameron, man.
Yeah,
That's just
yeah,
crazy.
yeah. Academy Awards. It was nominated for a couple. Wow.
It won, didn't it?
It was nominated for 6, if my math is right. Yes, 6. So it was nominated for cinematography and editing, and it won in makeup, sound effects, editing, and visual effects.
Makes sense.
Which I think makes a lot of sense because I would say
Mhm.
these are some of the best visual effects of all
Makeup
time.
is a good one too.
Yeah,
Makeup is a
especially
good one
because
too.
the
In the
just the
first
Terminator.
movie, yeah, in the first movie, when Arnold gets shot in the face and you see the robot underneath his face, it's an animatronic, or at least it's stop
Yeah.
motion.
Mm-hmm.
In this second movie, it's still Arnold, and it's just the makeup.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that there's such a visual difference between those two that I was like, oh my god, this is actually like an improvement. This is so much better.
Shows
It's
the
crazy.
ingenious of Cameron. Yeah. Because there's also that one scene when
He didn't do the makeup.
when they're taking the CPU out of Arnold's head. I don't know if you know this, but that's not a mirror. That's an empty wall.
Hmm.
So what they did was they had a head
Interesting.
of Arnold that Linda Hamilton was working on in the foreground, and the background, which we think is the mirror, is the real Arnold, and it's Linda Hamilton's twin sister. And so Linda Hamilton
Mhm.
is mirroring
Her
her sister
sister.
is mirroring her as she's
That's
working on
interesting.
Arnold's head. And that to me is just like you could have easily done something completely different, but it just shows James Cameron like,
Yeah.
no, 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 we need this shot. I don't care how we
Yeah.
get it. We need this. It's just
Jeez.
it's pretty smart. It's smartly done.
Yeah.
Because
Hey
every other
man, if
director
you
would have
want
just
to be
been
a
like,
famous act,
every other director would just be like, all right, we're just gonna do a shot from the side, a shot from the head, and that's it.
yeah.
But James Cameron's like, no, we need to get in there in one shot, facing the mirror, get it done. It's pretty cool.
Hey man, if you want to be a famous actor in Hollywood, have a twin. Have an
Yeah.
identical twin.
Yeah, really. But make sure the twin is more famous than you. That way you don't get any of the stress.
True. True.
All right, so let me ask you this,
So-
because you said it's not the greatest science fiction movie of all time. And we'll end on this note.
Okay. Okay.
Where is it in terms of science fiction? Where would you put it? Like tiers. Just give me a tier list. You don't even have to
Where would
rank it
it
1 through
be?
10.
You know what's interesting? When we were talking about how this movie is such a different genre from the first, I actually don't even feel like the second movie is a science fiction movie.
Interesting.
Because it just goes full in on the action. I mean, sure, the special effects and there are people from the future and all that. But, like, there's science fiction elements to it, but it just doesn't feel for me like a science fiction movie at all.
Mm-hmm.
Which, genre is subjective. I'm sure its IMDb page is still going to list it as science fiction anyway. But nonetheless, because in the first movie, you actually get to see the future and the fighting that goes on in the future, and you got the robots flying in the sky and all that stuff. But in the second movie, it's all present day, present time, pretty much. It barely ever goes to the future. What's funny too is I actually just now realized when I was talking about how Kyle Reese tells her the story and it's a flashback to the future. I didn't realize that. But it's technically a flash forward, but it operates the same as a flashback would.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in the second movie, when Sarah Connor has her flash forward, it's not technically a flashback. It is like a vision.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I didn't realize that little linguistic twist. This movie has flash forwards, not flashbacks. So, yeah, to me, it doesn't even really come across as a sci-fi movie. Just an action movie with sci-fi elements. I would think of it more as an action movie. And in that case, I would put it pretty high up.
That was going to be my follow-up question.
It would be probably, I don't know, man. I'll say top 10. Because I can think of maybe 10 action movies. So it would have to be in that top 10
Fair
that I
enough.
actually cared to watch.
Fair enough.
Not my genre, but this is a good example of it. Yeah, for sure. For sure. And that's tough because my top 3 would probably be the 3 Bourne movies. But other than that, so it's not going to be top 3 for sure. For sure. But yeah, no, sci-fi, that's a little different.
Makes sense.
That's a
Makes
little-
sense.
yeah.
And I don't think
You got to go
you're
to space
wrong.
for me for it to be sci-fi.
Yeah. No, I got you, man.
No.
I got you.
Yeah.
Before we go,
Yeah,
Robert Patrick.
no, for sure.
We didn't talk about Robert Patrick. I feel like we need to talk about Robert Patrick.
We didn't talk about Kyle Reese that much either. No.
Kyle Reese isn't in this movie.
He's in the first one, though. He's an interesting element.
Yeah, but we're not talking about the first one. It's not the first one's birthday.
Well, I'll say... LMAO. You know what? I think he does a good job with very little. He has no character whatsoever.
No.
Because in the first movie, and this is why I think we might talk about Kyle Reese a little bit, but in the first movie, it's like, how do I want to describe it? Arnold is the villain, and he has lines of dialogue. He still talks, and even though he says like maybe 5 things throughout the whole film, he still has personality, right? You
Yeah.
kind of get a sense of, even though he's just a killing machine, he in a weird way has personality. Whereas in the second film, the T-1000 is just a killing machine, and its personality is that it just imitates other people.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, he's very creepy. He's very much like
Well,
Arnold in the first one. The same.
absolutely. He that's where I think he really it does it. That's why I think he doesn't come across as bad. Is because he just looks like a villainous person.
Hmm.
He just looks creepy, you know. And then there are moments. My favorite moment is he walks up to the moto cop and he's like, "That's a nice bike.
Say, that's a nice bike.
That's a nice bike."
Yeah, this movie is very much an 80s, 90s action movie with the amount of one-liners that it
You know what's
has. And I was actually very
interesting?
surprised by
Yeah,
that.
that's what's
But
so interesting about Terminator 2 is because it's not a campy story, but so much of the dialogue is so freaking campy, man.
yeah.
And then the
Yeah.
freaking ending where he's melting in lava and he gives a thumbs up. I'm like, get out of here. Shut up. It's so
Dun, dun, dun.
ridiculous. But yeah, no, nonetheless.
Dun-dun-dun-dun. Yeah, yeah.
Nonetheless. All right. Terminator 3. Let's talk about that. No, I'm joking.
I've only seen like 10 minutes of Terminator 3. Don't think I want to see anything
Terminator.
more than that.
All right. Terminator Salvation. Let's talk about that.
this. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about the franchise and how it's gone off a cliff, basically. Um, does it surprise you at all that that's happened? It surprises me because Terminator 1 and 2, you know, you can say they're the greatest movies of all time. You can say they're not the greatest movies of all time, whatever, whatever. But they were extremely popular movies. And for
They're actually pretty decent.
yeah, and
Yeah.
they're actually good. And for 3
You know
and
what?
Salvation and Genesis and Dark Fate to be crap.
Well,
It's weird.
here's the issue, or at least here's so the story goes. It's very similar to Alien.
Yeah.
Alien is an insanely popular movie, but it doesn't. It's not really a franchise. It's really just meant to be a one-off thing. But it made a lot of money, so we're gonna give it a sequel. Now, interestingly, similar to Terminator, the time between the first Alien movie and the second Alien movie was actually quite a while. I don't know if it was 7 years, but it wasn't immediate. They wanted to make a sequel, but because it wasn't meant to be a franchise, it was kind of just like, well, what do we do now? And that was where James Cameron stepped in and was like, I'll make it different. I'll just do something different with it. Make it a sci-fi action movie. Similarly, Terminator, the first movie, this is why I say it doesn't set up a sequel, is because it wasn't meant to be a franchise. Which is why it took so long for the second movie to come out, because it's like, well, what are we going to do with it? We don't know what to do with it anymore. We have to do something different at least. So it was never meant to be a franchise to begin with. And similar to Alien, how you can say Alien 1, yeah, that's good. Alien 2, it's different, but it's good. Alien 3, does anybody ever talk about that movie? Similar as Terminator is the exact same situation. It's like the first one was a good standalone action movie, but it made a lot of money, so we'll give it a sequel. Sequel does something different with it, so yeah, it's pretty good. But Terminator 3, do most people even know that exists? It's like it's not meant to be a franchise to begin with. For some reason it is. I think the difference between it and Alien is that it just had Arnold. Arnold is just willing to show up in all of them. And people will see a movie because Arnold is in it.
Yeah.
So,
Well, yeah, I mean that happened for Terminator Genesis. It's a terrible movie, and yet it is Schwarzenegger's second highest grossing movie.
so there you go. There you go.
Yeah,
It's all in his name.
you said it best.
It's
You
all in
said it
him.
best. It's very sad the way Terminator has gone. Alien, same thing, and even Predator. Um, but I don't think Predator is on the same level that Terminator and Alien are. It is sad.
Dude, you want to talk about good sequels? Alien versus Predator. Now, if you want to talk about my top 5 science fiction movies of all time, there you go. No, I'm joking.
Alien versus Predator, Requiem or
Alien versus Predator.
Requiem or the original?
There's more than one.
I think there's like
more than one.
I think there's like 3. They have
This
a
is
whole
news to me.
backstory now with Alien versus Predator.
Jesus Christ. That's certainly something.
What about, how do you feel about Terminator, the Sarah Connor Chronicles? Did you know about that?
Nice one. I did know about that. It was not a TV show though, right?
There was a
Or was
TV
it
show.
an actual show? I thought it was just a
TV show.
miniseries.
No, it was a TV show. It went for 2 seasons.
You know, that's one of those things where it's like it makes sense why it exists because her character has a lot of story potential. Like, what did she do in between having the kid and, you know, teaching him how to be John Connor, all that stuff. Like, there's a lot of potential in her character, so I know why it exists. I also know that there was probably a lot of money in there, so that's another reason why it exists. Did it have to? You know, they were so busy asking if they could that they just didn't stop to ask if they should. So
Yeah. Sad.
I don't even have to see it to know it's bad. It's one of those things, you know. It's just one of those things.
It's a sad state for Hollywood. That's it for Terminator 2. Now, that brings us to our... Yeah, cue us out with the theme song, Tim.
We're not over.
So this talking about Terminator 2 and the kind of sequels aren't supposed to be good, and yet Terminator 2 is, had me thinking, what are some other sequels that are as good, if not better, than the original? And that was our homework assignment for the week, and to throw a little curveball to get our brains really thinking, and also so we wouldn't cheap out because we talk about these, or at least I talk about these movies a lot, but we decided no Dark Knight and no Godfather
No
Part
Dark
2.
Knight.
So those are already
Yeah.
1 and 2. But we kind of wanted to talk about, or at least I wanted to ask the question of any other sequels that you would consider on the same level as the original.
What? Yeah, and I mean, Alien 2 was the first one that came to my mind.
Sure,
We're
yeah.
talking about James Cameron.
Yeah.
But since we talked about that one earlier, what I was specifically trying to think of were sequels that, similar to Alien and Terminator, sequels that were non-franchised. You know, because it's like, I love the Bourne movies, but it was meant to be a trilogy. And they even have more movies now. So, like, as much as I love the sequels, like Bourne Supremacy and Bourne Ultimatum, it was meant to be, you know, a franchise. So the sequels had to have potential, and then they had to live up to the original, the first one. So I tried specifically to think of sequels that were like, hey, this movie is a good standalone film, but maybe we can give it more. The first one for me that comes to mind is John Wick 2, at least as a recent example. Because the first John Wick is kind of similar to Alien and Terminator, that it's like, you know, there's hints of a world, there's hints of mythology, but it's just meant to be hints.
Yeah.
And John Wick 2 just goes, they're like, okay, we'll show you the world. And I think it lives up to the expectation. At least it did for me.
I would agree.
Yeah. So that for me was the first one that came to mind, because if it was just the first John Wick movie and that was all we had, I think people would be able to look at it and they'd be able to be like, that's a good, you know, just a good action movie. Just a good action movie. It hits all the beats it's supposed to. The action does not insult the audience. You can clearly see what's going on. But I think getting the sequel, it was like, you know, there's more potential here, and we might not mess it up. So let's pursue that. I think it's you might complain that it's just another action movie. Like it doesn't do a different genre. It doesn't really do anything different with John Wick. But I would just say, yeah, no, I think it's equal to the original for sure for me. And then my second movie, one that I believe
Well, can I ask you something about
the original.
Let me ask you something about John Wick.
Oh yeah, about John Wick.
Sorry. Do you think? How do you feel about part 3?
It shouldn't exist.
Okay, I feel the same way.
Part 3. Here's the thing. Here's what's interesting about John Wick. I think the first movie is a good standalone, but John Wick 2 set up its own trilogy. Like there's John Wick, and then there's 2, 3, and 4.
Because I don't think anybody watched the first one and was like, "This is going to be a
great trilogy."
Yeah.
So I think the second film was made with more sequels in mind, and it definitely sets up the third film. I just think the third film just doesn't come anywhere close to the
first two
satisfying the first two.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
The promises that are set up, it just doesn't, which is what I think makes these sequels so much more, because it's like when the first movie doesn't set up a sequel, you don't have any promises to fulfill. And so you can kind of just do whatever you want. You can do a different genre, and I think that's what makes, John Wick 3 had promises it had to fulfill, and there's an expectation there, and that's never good.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree with that. What was your second one?
So the second one that I think is far superior to the first, and I know we've talked about this movie before, but 22 Jump Street.
Yes, I have that one on my list too.
That's on your list too?
Yeah.
Because it's like, it's not supposed to be a franchise.
Yep.
We're never going to get a 23 Jump Street, that's for sure. But for a fact that what's their name? Chris and Phil, the directors. I forgot, it's like Chris Miller and Phil Lord or something like that. I don't know their last names. Phil Lord and Chris Miller, yeah, that's right. They were like, oh God, we got to do a sequel to this one. Well, okay, we'll just do literally anything. Just do literally anything.
Well, what's smart about those movies is that they're parodies, and I don't think they're so subtle in what they're parodying that I really didn't pick up it was a parody until somebody else told me they were parodies, which is why the second one is so smart, because the first one is parodying, generic cop movies. The second one is parodying sequels. Like Ice Cube even says straight up, just do the same shit that you were doing before. It worked the first time, it'll work the second time, and it's such a bold statement, and it's kind of like a take on the modern Hollywood landscape, where it's like studios just do whatever they were doing the first time. I think those movies are really smartly done, and for comedies to be a sequel to a comedy to be funny, if not funnier.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I love those two movies. Those are some of my favorite modern comedies.
Yeah, so I feel the same way. That's why I would put that one up there, because it just, like you said, it's actually just incredibly smart.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like a smart movie that tries to act dumb.
Yeah. And what's funny is I remember watching 22 Jump Street with my dad, and I was like, "What'd you think of it?" He's like, "It was funny. It was so dumb." And I was like, "What? It's a comedy. Like comedies are supposed to be dumb." But like looking back on it, it's like, almost, they were intentionally trying to be dumb.
Yeah. Seriously. And what's funny too is that if like what to look for.
Mhm.
It's such an incredibly smart movie. There
Yeah.
are so many just individual scenes and lines of dialogue where you're like I remember somebody pointed out where he does the meet cute, where it's like, oh, it's a meet cute, and my friend's like, you know what that means, right? And he explained it to me, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, that's so like that's them telling the audience like we're trying to like be stupid on purpose. We will be so obvious about it. Or oh god, I don't know. There are so many moments in that movie that I could talk about that aren't sequel related. But yeah, for a film that just takes the first one and then just says, let's just do something, just whatever. Who cares at this point?
Yeah.
We didn't deserve a sequel. We don't need one. We can do literally anything. That's totally 22 Jump Street is a good example of that for sure.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to take that one away from you though.
No. It's okay. It's okay. I like the movie. I'm glad you picked that too. We're on the same wavelength.
Yeah.
Uh,
What was another one for you?
can I give you a sequel?
Yeah.
10 Cloverfield Lane?
That was also one I was thinking of.
Dude, whoa. So just for the record, everybody, we did not cross-check each other's list. We don't like to do that. We like to catch each other by surprise.
We've just only ever seen the same movies.
Yeah, I really like 10 Cloverfield Lane. And a lot of people didn't like it because it was nothing like the original. But seeing John Goodman as this crazy...
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Full disclosure, I actually prefer the original movie, but I still included this one on my list of sequels. And for starters, John Goodman. Absolutely.
Such a wonderful performance because we're used to him being this kind of sweetheart character, and he's a total creep.
It's like the reverse of Arnold.
Yeah.
He's always the good guy, and now he's the bad guy.
It's kind of cool to see him in a different role. But just from a structure format, the original was a found footage, old school horror thriller movie.
Monster movie. Yeah.
Yeah, monster movie. And this one is a thriller that speaks about the human psyche and human relationships, more or less. And kind of the mental state that people can go through when they're stuck together for so long. And it is also a thriller.
Did this movie predict COVID?
This movie started COVID. And I think that's such a smart way to build upon the world if you're gonna build upon the world. I have issues with the ending.
Interesting?
But
I hate the ending so much.
I think up until she leaves the house, it's smart.
Yeah. And I think what is interesting about Cloverfield was that it was intended to be a franchise. Like it sets up a sequel. The whole movie, the original movie is like, you want to see what's going on, you'll find out. It sets up its own franchise. It took so long for us to get the sequel. I think the first movie came out in like 2009 or 10 or something like that. So it was a while, probably even before then. It's an old movie at this point. Old for us, at least. But what's most striking about it is just how visually different it is. Because the first movie is a found footage. And for the rest of the franchise to just be like, shot on a tripod. you know? Just anything you do is going to be different from the original. And I think 10 Cloverfield had that going for it. And it was like, well, if we visually have to be different from the original, we can't do another found footage. Let's just tell a completely different story from the original. Let's not have any aliens in it. Oh, whoops, never mind. The ending sucks. Okay, anyway.
Yeah, the ending is leaves a sad, bitter taste in my mouth, but the rest of the movie is phenomenal.
The rest of the movie is phenomenal. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Did you ever see the Paradox?
No. After the ending of 10 Cloverfield Lane, I was like, okay, I don't want to watch this.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Another sequel. Back to the Future Part 2?
Go ahead. That was also one I was thinking of. Now, I don't know if that was meant to be a trilogy or not. Um,
I think they were
but I think
expecting a
it's a
sequel, but I don't think they were expecting a trilogy.
yeah, for sure.
Because
Especially
the third
because the
movie
third one
is so
is
different
okay.
than the first two. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, you know what Back to the Future 2 does is it actually goes to the future. And I think that's one of those things where it was like, no, it's seriously, it's so dumb to say, but it's like, I think that's what everyone wanted to see out of the sequel, and it just did it perfectly, you know? It just fulfills its promise so well, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And it's a
At least
smart
for me, that's how I
continuation
feel.
of the story. And the
Because we all watch
kind
Back to
of
the Future for the story. Yeah.
yeah, well, you know what I mean, like the adventures of
I know what you mean.
Doc and Marty. It's cool. You could watch a whole TV
Yeah.
show of this, and you could animate it
Seriously, yeah.
and call them Rick and Morty.
Shut up,
Wait,
shut up.
wait a minute.
Hello, man.
No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, it felt like another adventure that was a natural
Hmm.
progression, right?
Progression.
I don't mean
Yeah.
to be, film snob over here when I'm talking about story structure, but
Yeah.
it just felt like a continuation of their characters and the shenanigans that they get up to. So,
Dude, how pretentious of you, Isaac. Really? Back to the Future Part 2? Come on, man. Normal people watch this. You gotta be able to relate to it.
I'm sorry, people.
Now, here's for me an example of a sequel that nobody asked for, but we got. And in my opinion, actually is not bad. Whether or not it lives up to the original is not for debate because it will not and it wasn't going to. But it doesn't insult its audience. It's straightforward. It's funny. And that was one of the expectations that it had to fulfill. And it's Finding Dory.
Interesting.
Pixar and sequels don't go together unless you're Toy Story. Toy Story can have as many sequels as it wants for till the end of time. But any other Pixar movie, just imagine the sequel doesn't exist. Incredibles 2, maybe, but just pretend it doesn't exist. But Finding Dory was not bad.
So I'm gonna be called
Did you
a
ever see
fraud.
it?
I'm gonna be called a fraud for this.
What?
I never saw
Okay, what
Finding
did you
Dory.
You never saw Finding Dory?
No.
You know what, though? That's fine, though. Because, like I said, nobody asked for it. You were not obligated to see this movie because it's a sequel.
I don't know. I felt the first one wrapped everything up nice and tight.
Yeah. I think, you know what? It's a good example of there's a character with story potential. You know, everyone loves Dory. And I think the Pixar execs were like, well, everyone loves her. Let's give her her own movie.
Yeah.
I think because it's called, here's what's interesting. Because it's called Finding Dory, I think a lot of people expected to see the same movie again. And it's actually not that. It's not the same movie. It is kind of just a, get out, quick 20-minute adventure, It doesn't expand upon the mythology of Finding Nemo in any way. But it's inoffensive. It's not Cars 2, so that's a plus. It's
Cars
funny.
2's catching shots.
It has amazing animation, which if you want to talk about, stuff that's never been done before, the octopus in this movie, interestingly enough. So here's a little fun trivia fact. The list of the most difficult things Pixar has ever had to animate. Number 1 is the octopus. There's actually one shot in this movie where the octopus escapes from its tank and it moves around a room. Like there's a little kitchen area, and it octopus slithers its way through the kitchen. That one shot took 2 years to animate.
Dang.
And this is a movie where, the whole movie probably took like 5 years to animate. That one shot took 2 whole years. Because what made them so difficult were the tentacles. They had to animate each of the tentacles individually, but also animate them in a realistic way, so they all had minds of their own, like tentacles do. And it took them forever to figure out. Part of the development for this movie, and part of the reason why there was so much of a gap between this movie and the first one and Finding Nemo, is because they had to figure out how to animate the octopus. So for any animation nerds watching, if you haven't seen Finding Dory and you want to see something that's difficult to animate, watch the octopus. Hank the octopus, that's his name. He has 4 hearts. There you go.
Dang.
But nobody asked for that. Nobody asked for a sequel to it. And this is my question for you.
Give me your
Are you ready
question.
for this? Totally unprompted. You're not going to be prepared for this, but you might have an answer.
It's all right. I like it like that.
What movie do you want a sequel for?
1917, but set it in 1918.
Nice one.
No, I'm just kidding.
Nice one. 1918.
As of recent, 1917, but make it 1937. Terms of sequels for movies that I want, I don't know. There's not really any movies that I've seen recently in the past, maybe
because I think
6
we
years
live in
where
kind
I've
of
been like,
I want to see more of this. Yeah.
I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but as soon as a sequel is made from a movie I like, I may be like, oh, cool. Or I'll be like,
Yeah,
no.
because I think we kind of live in this weird era of
Everything's
everyone
a
talks
sequel.
about how all the movies are sequels and all that stuff, but like in a weird way, a lot of the sequels are actually like reboots. Like there was Blade Runner 2040, whatever. I didn't care. It sucked. And then there was
9.
Trainspotting 2. Yeah, 9. Okay.
Yeah.
Trainspotting 2. Which, that's a sequel nobody asked for, but we still got it. And it's like, it's actually not that bad compared to the first one. It's like kind of a reboot, kind of not. I don't know. It's interesting. And then there's the whole, like, there's Creed, for example, which is like a sequel to the whole, it's like a franchise sequel, kind of, And then there was Mad Max Fury Road, which is a sequel, but it's also a reboot. So yeah, I think that's just the weird little paradigm that we're living in.
Yeah, we're gonna get a sequel to something.
Win. Yeah.
So I'm not really. I've just accepted it at this point.
Yeah.
It's gonna happen.
Yeah. It's gonna happen.
Can I ask you about Creed? How did you feel about the Creed?
Creed?
The 2 Creeds.
Creed or Creed 2? Because I didn't see Creed 2.
Both.
But the first Creed I thought was fine.
So let's talk about Creed.
I mean, I love Michael B. Jordan. I'll watch him in anything.
Mm-hmm.
I think, however, so Creed is interesting because, like I said, it's kind of a franchise sequel. Because it's not a sequel to the Rocky movies, but it's still a Rocky movie. And I think 100%, if you ask me, Creed is as good. As much as I love Michael B. Jordan, and I'll watch any movie he's in, unless it's bad, I think Sylvester Stallone, it's kind of like the Jamie Lee Curtis thing I was talking about earlier, bringing her back in the Halloween movies, like bringing him back in the Creed movie was, for me, that made the movie pretty much,
Yeah. I would agree. I enjoyed Creed. Creed 2 was It was okay, but Creed is pretty good.
Yeah, really with Creed, it's not like I expected it to be the greatest thing of all time. Um, there are some cinematography decisions that I would like for them to take back, but I think it's definitely better than most of the Rocky sequels. I can tell you that much.
Yeah, yeah. After shoot, I don't even know what is it 4 where he fights the Russian
Yeah, the Russian.
Ivan Drago.
Watch Rocky 1 and then watch the one where he fights the Russian guy. I think that's Rocky 4. Those are the only two you need.
Yeah.
At least in my opinion.
Can I give you some dishonorable mentions for sequels?
If you have the rest of your life to list them off, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I just want to give you a couple that
Yeah, yeah.
I think really did their franchises a disservice.
Okay, go ahead.
The next Karate Kid, starring a young Hilary Swank, borderline killed the Karate Kid franchise. Even though I think we could say the Karate Kid franchise was already dead at that point.
Dude, what are you
Just a
talking
sequel
about,
nobody
man?
really asked for.
Dude, are you what? Dude, come on, man. I mean, the freaking Jaden Smith Karate Kid totally brought that franchise back.
No. A Good Day to Die Hard.
Dude, I love how. Okay, that's what's really funny too. That's a perfect. The Die Hard franchise is such a perfect example of like the antithesis of what we've been talking about. It was never meant to be a sequel. It was never meant to be a franchise. But it made a lot of money, so they made a second one, and it was like, I don't know. Does anybody really hold Die Hard 2 in the same regard as the first one?
I mean, obviously, if so many people were making sequels,
We need more, yeah. But it's one of those things where I think it's similar to the Terminator, where it's like it's just the fact that Bruce Willis is willing to show up for every single sequel. It's like if Arnold didn't show up in Terminator 3, we never would have gotten 5 more. But Bruce Willis just wants that paycheck, man.
I can't hate on him.
That's just me, though. You can't hate on him for that. Sylvester Stallone does the same thing in all the Rambo and Rocky movies. So, what can you do?
Yep. I think that's it. That's all I have for worst sequels.
The
Speed
Dark
2?
Knight? What the heck, Isaac? That's a good Speed 2. No.
Speed 2 is
Let's not
pretty
talk
bad.
about Speed 2.
The mid-90s Batman and Robins, or Batman and Robin, excuse me.
I gotta forgive those. That's that's Batman. You're gonna get sequels out of those. What can you do?
What about Mean Girls 2?
Okay, that's actually it's funny you brought that up. What's funny is that when we did coming of age movies, I completely forgot we briefly brought up Mean Girls. And Mean Girls 2 is an interesting one where it's like, nobody asked for this. We didn't need the sequel for it, but what's funny too? It's not even that the first Mean Girls like is such an amazing movie like Alien is, or Die Hard. It's really just that it's like quotable. It's just kind of weirdly culturally significant for us, I guess. Every single freaking October 3rd, it's nothing but Mean Girl memes.
October 3rd as a date that will live in infamy.
Seriously. So, yeah,
all right, here's a sequel. Here's a sequel that didn't need to exist. Are you still talking about Mean Girls? I'm sorry.
No, I'm not talking about Mean Girls.
Okay. Here's a sequel that I want to talk about that is the antithesis of any kind of sequel making that, regardless, like
Paddington
nobody
2.
nobody should have ever thought this was a good idea. Ever, ever,
Alright,
ever,
what
ever,
is it?
ever. American Psycho 2. What the actual F was the thought process behind making American Psycho 2? What was the thought process?
If I'm not
Because this wasn't a
mistaken,
movie that made a lot of money. So there's not, it's not like you could just
isn't
say, "Oh,
Christian
well,
Bale
it made a
in
lot
it?
of money and we can, we can make more money and make this a franchise."
Man, that's you know what is so funny too is the fact that the first one. That's one of those things where it's already a mistake, and you know it's already a mistake because the first one is based on a book, and there is no second book. So the fact that you're going to make a sequel to it without any source material, it's like, what are you going to do? Like the first one was pretty much established to be good because the book sold well. The book was a bestseller, and everyone knows
Yeah.
the book. You don't have anything to go off of except for just. It's one of those instances where it's like you're doing something different. And we praised Terminator and we praised Alien 2 for, you're doing something different with it. That's good. But this is one where it's like it's almost bad to do something different because the first one was good because there was source material for it.
Mm-hmm.
This one you're just flying by the seat of your pants. And it's directed by Morgan Freeman. No, it's not. Morgan J. Freeman.
Not even speaking about the source material that the first one had. The first one, the whole point of the first one is the whole shtick of the first movie is this really happening or is this all in his imagination? And we don't know.
Yeah. That's the gimmick.
Right? And that's the whole thing of the movie, and that's why it's such a good movie, is because is this dude actually killing people or is he just messed up in the head so much? From being around all these douchebags all day.
Yeah.
And the second one just eliminates all nuance from that and all, subtext and ability to even try and analyze the first one because now we know the first one. I mean, I don't count the second one as canon. You can still look at the first one without the second one whatsoever. But
it's not canon.
The whole reason, the second one just kills any idea of it not being real. And it being in Patrick Bateman's head, and it's just a big slap in the face to the original movie.
Oh, what can you do? It's one of those things where people probably go their entire lives not even knowing there's an American Psycho 2.
I guarantee you, there's 3 people that were just like, "What the hell? There's an American Psycho 2?"
Seriously. Yeah. If this episode gets 3 viewers, all 3 of them were like, "Wait, really?"
Probably. You're probably right. Okay, yeah, I got that off my chest. So I'm good. Any other sequels
All right.
that you want to talk about?
How could we not talk about Paddington 2, my guy? The fact that it freaking dethroned Citizen Kane, the greatest movie of all time.
Hey man,
That's how that works,
Paddington
right?
2
Paddington
is so good.
2 is now the greatest movie of all time. That's how that works,
If
right?
Paddington 2 is so good, how come we don't have a Paddington 2? Huh? Did you ever think about that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, I bet you
Dude,
didn't.
that's like freaking Lion King 1 3/4. When are we going to get the Paddington 2, the sequel?
Yeah,
God.
the sequel to Paddington 2. Paddington 2.
You know what? Here's another one too. And this will be the last one we should bring up because this is going to almost be 2 hours at this point.
Yeah,
Last one.
you're good.
Cross my heart. Take a needle in my die. Last one. The Matrix 2 isn't that good.
Interesting.
It did. I mean, it's one of those examples. It was never meant to be a franchise,
Right.
but we got it.
We got a
And
trilogy.
I think we got an entire freaking, and we're gonna get a 4th one.
And we're going to get a reboot.
If you ask me, here's the thing. Here's what's interesting about The Matrix. It's such a self-contained movie, not only in terms of its story, but also its themes. Because it can be read as an allegory for so many different things that when you add in the sequel on top of that, I start to wonder, what are you trying to say with this movie? Like the Wachowski sisters have publicly admitted that the first Matrix is a trans allegory, or at least an allegory for being transgender. That's a better way to word that sentence. So then when I look at the sequel, I'm like, well, then what's the second one an allegory for? Mm-hmm. Making more money? What are you trying to tell with that one? It doesn't do anything else. And at least in the first one, you can either say, okay, well, on the one hand, you have your Baudrillard and your Lost Futures and your trans allegory. But then on the second film, it's like, well, now you're just a normal action movie, I guess? I don't know.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
Yeah, it's pretty dumb. Pretty ridiculous. The amount of sequels we get that we don't need. But whatever. Money talks at the end of the day, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. All you gotta do is make a lot of friggin' money. Hey, you know what sucks? Is the fact that it's so case by case. The freaking Matrix, the reboot, the fourth one, could be the worst movie of all time. And we're gonna be like, oh man, reboots suck so much. Never make a sequel a decade after the first one. And then we're gonna come on this podcast and be like, yo man, freaking Mad Max Fury Road, greatest sequel of all time? Question mark? It's like, it sucks that it's so case by case that because it makes it so hard to talk about it, It's like,
well,
but then again,
for me,
art is subjective. So,
and I'll leave this. This will be our last thought. But for me, when it comes to what do I think makes a sequel so good, and not crap, like American Psycho 2. Looking at you stupid head. I feel like we need a little more character progression. Excuse me, I can't talk right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
We need to learn something new about them, right? We need to see them in a situation that they're normally in, which is I'm gonna talk about it. The Dark Knight. Why The Dark Knight is so good? It's because we see Bruce Wayne at his weakest that we've ever seen him in the movies. I think I mentioned this in a podcast before, but
you did.
That's why I find it so compelling, is because the character of Bruce Wayne was never tested that way, that he was in The Dark Knight. So that's why I think that that's when I think sequels work the best, is just pushing characters to do their own. Obviously, it helps when you can have the same filmmakers from the first one to the second one.
For sure.
But sometimes that ends up not being even more helpful. Alfonso Cuarón in the Harry Potter and Prisoner of Azkaban. Probably one of the better examples of changing a director and changing your whole franchise. But I mean, we see that with James Cameron in Aliens. We see that with George Lucas with Empire Strikes Back.
We see that with David Fincher in Alien 3.
David Fincher in Alien 3.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think when you can have the same filmmakers, it definitely helps your case. Yeah. I don't know. Any last words for sequels before we're out of here?
No, I think, sequels are always necessary. At least they're a necessary part of Hollywood. I know that there are some people who are like, never make sequels. I will never watch sequels. Always watch the original. But then you don't get stuff like Terminator 2, or you don't get Aliens, or, you can't even have franchises.
Yeah.
So it's, like I said, it's just case by case, just aim to make the story as best as it can be. And that's it. Don't worry about making the greatest movie of all time. Just tell the story as it has to be told. And make it entertaining at the very least. Jesus Christ, make it entertaining. Please.
Yeah, come on, Hollywood. If any executive is listening to this, listen to us, man. We know what we're talking about.
We know what we're talking about, man. We just graduated film school. Of course, we know more than you.
I have a diploma hanging on my parents' wall.
I have a degree in this.
Yeah. Exactly. Oh, seriously. That's funny. All right.
Finding Marlon Wynn. Okay.
Well, that's James. I'm Isaac.
Hello.
This was Hit Play. Tim, hit us with the outro music. We'll see you guys next week. Subscribe, follow. You know where to go. See you guys later.